I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Picture yourself on your 102nd birthday, 102 years old. Think about that. You are surrounded by the faces of people you love. Maybe your children are there, now grandparents themselves. Your grandchildren have lines on their faces too. There is cake, there are balloons with the number 102. The room is full of laughter, but then a quiet falls over everyone. You look around, and you realize they are all waiting. They are leaning in close, holding their breath, because they believe that after a century of living, you have figured something out. What do you whisper to them? What is the one final gift of wisdom you give to the people you love before you close your eyes? Today, we are going to answer that question. We are going to walk through the final lesson of a man named Arthur, who celebrated his last birthday with a secret that changed his family forever. Stay with me until the end, because what he said has almost nothing to do with diet or exercise, and it might just change the way you wake up tomorrow morning. As we get older, we spend a lot of time thinking about our bodies. We worry about our knees hurting when we stand up from a chair. We check our blood pressure. We try to remember to take our vitamins. We walk around the block because the doctor told us to keep moving. And this is all important. Taking care of the physical body is a blessing, but there is a different kind of health that many of us ignore as we age. It is the health of our presence. It is the health of the invisible part of us that looks out from behind our eyes. Arthur lived to be 102 years old, and if you looked at his diet, you would not be impressed. He ate white bread. He put butter on everything. He never stepped foot in a gym. But Arthur had something that kept his heart beating long after the doctors thought it would stop. He had a reason to open his eyes every single morning. To understand his final whisper, we have to go back about 20 years to a Tuesday afternoon that felt very ordinary at the time. Arthur was 82 years old, sitting on his porch in a small town in the Midwest. It was autumn, and the leaves were falling. He was watching the cars drive by, but no one was waving anymore. Most of his old friends from the factory were gone. His wife, Eleanor, had passed a few years earlier, and the silence in the house was the hardest thing to carry. It is a specific kind of loneliness that settles in when you have outlived almost everyone who knew your story. Arthur started to believe the lie that so many seniors start to believe. He started to believe that his life was over, that he was just waiting for the final page to turn, and that he had nothing left to offer the world. One afternoon, his teenage grandson, a boy named Michael, shuffled out onto the porch. Michael was struggling. He was 15, his parents were fighting, and he felt invisible. He slumped down in the chair next to Arthur and just stared at his shoes. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy. Then, Arthur didn't offer advice. He didn't lecture. He simply looked over at the old oak tree in the front yard and said, "I remember planting that tree with your grandmother. The day we dug the hole, we found a broken arrowhead. We figured some kid had lost it 100 years before we were even born. I always wondered who that kid was. That was it. That was the sentence that shifted everything." Michael looked up. He forgot about his own problems for a minute because suddenly he was seeing his grandfather not as an old man in a sweater, but as a young man with dirty hands digging a hole, wondering about a boy from the distant past. This became their ritual. Every week, Arthur would share a story, and Michael would listen. But here is the secret that Arthur didn't tell Michael until much later. These conversations didn't just save Michael from his teenage sadness, they saved Arthur's life. The act of being seen, the act of passing on a memory, sparked a fire in Arthur's brain. He started writing things down, he started sleeping better. His posture changed because he had a purpose on Tuesday afternoons. He had to be sharp. He had to remember the details. Many seniors don't realize that our brains are not just storage units for the past. Our brains are engines, and stories are the fuel. When you stop telling your stories, the engine starts to sputter. When you think nobody cares about the broken arrowhead you found 60 years ago, a part of you starts to fade. But when you find someone who listens, your mind comes alive again. This is the first lesson we can learn from Arthur. Purpose does not have to be a grand accomplishment. It doesn't have to be a charity gala or a marathon. Purpose can be sitting on a porch and telling a 15-year-old that you once found an arrowhead. Purpose is the feeling that another human being needs to know what you know. It is the act of turning your memories into medicine for the next generation. Let's fast forward. Michael grew up. He went to college, got a job in the city, and life got busy. The porch visits became phone calls, and sometimes the phone calls were missed. Guilt crept in, as it always does. But Arthur didn't stop. He started talking to the mailman. He started talking to the young couple who moved in next door. He would sit on that porch and tell anyone who stopped about the history of the street, or the time he shook hands with a famous baseball player, or the recipe for his wife's apple cobbler that wasn't written down anywhere except in his hands. Arthur instinctively understood something that science is just now proving. Loneliness is a health risk, yes. But the antidote isn't just being around people. The antidote is being known by people. It is sharing the specific details of your life so that someone can see the world through your eyes, even for just a few minutes. Now, Arthur lived to be 102 years old. That is an incredible number. But his final birthday was different. He knew it was his last. The family gathered. They brought the cake with the big numbers. Michael, now a middle-aged man with his own children, sat right beside the bed. He held Arthur's hand. The room was noisy with the chatter of relatives, the clinking of plates, and the shuffling of feet. But Arthur was very quiet. He was saving his energy. He was looking at each face slowly, deliberately. He looked at his granddaughter, who was always so hard on herself. He looked at his nephew, who worked too much. He looked at Michael, who had tears in his eyes. The room eventually went silent. You know that moment in a family gathering when the noise just dies down, and everyone can hear the clock ticking on the wall. It was in that silence that Arthur, with a voice that was barely a whisper, pulled Michael closer. Everyone expected a profound secret. Maybe he was going to reveal the secret to a long life. Maybe he was going to talk about eating more greens or praying every morning. Maybe he was going to confess a hidden treasure. Everyone leaned in, holding their breath. Michael leaned his ear right next to his grandfather's lips, and Arthur, the man who had lived for over a century, whispered 5 words. Just 5 words. Don't let me be forgotten. That was the whisper. Don't let me be forgotten. It was not about him wanting a statue or a street named after him. It was not ego. It was the deepest human need. Arthur knew that we die twice. We die the first time when our heart stops beating. And we die the second time when someone says our name for the very last time. He wasn't afraid of leaving the earth. He was afraid of being erased from the kitchen tables of the people he loved. He wanted Michael to remember the Arrowhead story. He wanted someone 60 years from now to bite into an apple cobbler and say, "You know, my great-grandfather Arthur used to make this." This is where the lesson shifts for those of us watching today. Many seniors don't realize that we are often the keepers of the family's soul. We hold the history. We hold the recipes, the old grudges, the funny jokes, and the tragedies that shaped who our children have become. But too often, we stay quiet because we think we are boring. We think nobody wants to hear about the Depression, or the war, or the time the tractor got stuck in the mud. We think the younger generation is too busy with their phones. But Arthur's Whisper proves that our stories are not just nostalgia. They are survival guides for the people coming after us. Your story matters. The specific way you laughed at your husband's bad jokes matters. The way you survived that winter with no money matters. Your memory is the foundation a family is built on. If you don't share it, the house collapses. Now, let's bring this into a practical space. How can we apply Arthur's Whisper to our own lives tomorrow morning? Because this isn't just a sad story about a man who passed away. This is a roadmap for vibrant living right now. The first step is to realize that you are living in the middle of your own story. Even today, this morning you probably did something that is worth telling. Maybe you saw a bird on your windowsill that reminded you of a pet from long ago. Maybe you heard a song on the radio that played at your prom. Don't just let that memory drift away like smoke. Grab it. Write it down on a napkin. Call your grandson and say, "I just heard our song." He might not understand in the moment, but you are planting a seed. The second step is to ask the younger people in your life a question before you give them a story. This creates a bridge. If you simply start lecturing a teenager about 1954, they might tune out. But if you ask them, "What is the hardest thing you are dealing with right now?" and then you listen, and then you say, "Let me tell you about a time I was terrified and didn't know what to do." Suddenly, you are not just an old person rambling. You are a guide. You are a hero. The connection happens when your history meets their present problem. The third step might be a little harder, but it is the most rewarding. You must let go of the idea that your life was ordinary. Too many seniors I talk to say, "Oh, I didn't do anything special." That is simply not true. A life lived through 80 or 90 years of change is an epic adventure. You survive technological shifts that the young mind cannot comprehend. You went from party lines to video calls. You survived grief and loss and still found a way to smile at a sunny day. That is strength. Sharing your small, quiet moments of resilience gives the younger generation permission to be human. They are living in a filtered world where everyone pretends to be perfect. Your stories of messy, real survival are oxygen to them. So let's return to that quiet room on the 102nd birthday. After Arthur whispered those 5 words, "Don't let me be forgotten," Michael squeezed his hand. He didn't just nod sadly. He didn't just say, "I won't, Grandpa." He made a decision right there. He looked around the room at his own children. He saw them staring at their phones, a little uncomfortable, not knowing how to deal with the heaviness of the moment. And Michael cleared his throat. He stood up and said, "Hey, did I ever tell you guys the story of the time Grandpa dug a hole and found an arrowhead?" The room shifted. The tension broke. The kids put down their phones. Michael started telling the story with as much detail as he could remember. He told them about the young man with dirty hands and the young woman who would become his grandmother. He told them about the mystery of wondering who the boy was 100 years before that, and as Michael told the story, a smile spread across Arthur's face. It was a weak smile, but it was pure light. You see, Arthur got to witness his own legacy. He got to hear his memory being passed on before he left. He realized in that moment that he wasn't going to be forgotten. The story was already flying from one branch of the family tree to another, like a bird that would keep singing long after he was gone. That is the gift Michael gave him. It wasn't the cake or the balloons. It was the proof that Arthur's life mattered, and that his voice would continue. This brings us to a bonus tip that is rarely discussed in senior health videos. We talk a lot about legacy writing, about writing a will or a life story for the grandchildren to read after we are gone. That is a beautiful idea. But there is something even more powerful. It is called the living eulogy. Don't wait for someone to speak beautiful words at your funeral. Don't wait for Michael to realize he has 100 unanswered questions after you are gone. Encourage the people you love to tell you what you mean to them right now. You can even start the conversation. You can look at your daughter and say, "I hope you know how much I love you. What is a happy memory you carry from when you were little?" This does two things. It fills your heart with joy while you are still here to feel it, and it teaches your children how to honor you while you are still in the room. It breaks the ice. It erases the awkwardness that often sits between generations. Imagine the healing that can happen when you hear, while you are healthy and alert, exactly how much you are treasured. We also have to address the reality of our bodies. You might be sitting here thinking, "I can't remember the details like I used to. My memory is foggy. I can't tell a straight story." That happens to all of us as we get older, and it is frustrating. But stories don't have to be perfectly linear to be impactful. A story is a feeling. If you forget the name of the street, but you remember the way the sun felt on your face, say that. Say, "I can't remember the name of the street, but the sun was so warm that day, and I felt so hopeful." That is the part that connects. The details aren't what bind us. The emotions are. Your children and grandchildren don't need a history textbook. They need to know what hope felt like when you were young. They need to know what fear felt like so they don't feel so alone in their own fear. As we wrap up today, I want you to sit with the weight of Arthur's whisper. Don't let me be forgotten. We started by asking what a 102-year-old man would say on his last birthday. But the truth is, the question isn't really about Arthur. The question is about you. What are the stories living inside your bones right now that the world needs to hear? Maybe it was a time you were deeply embarrassed but learned to laugh about it later. Maybe it was a moment of forgiveness that tore your heart open but saved a relationship. Maybe it is simply the name of your first dog or the smell of your mother's bread baking. These things seem small, but they are the fabric of humanity. I want to give you a gentle challenge. After this video ends, don't just click to the next one. Sit for a moment in the quiet. Look around the room you are in. Find one object, a photograph, a coffee mug, a worn-out chair, and make a decision to tell one person the story of that object today. Pick up the phone, write a short letter, send a voice message. Just say, "I was looking at this old picture today and it made me think of the time." That is it. That is the action that fights back against being forgotten. That is how you whisper to the future. Arthur taught us that longevity is not measured only in heartbeats, but in the echoes of our words. You can eat all the green vegetables in the world and walk 10,000 steps a day. But if your stories are trapped inside you, a piece of your spirit will feel unseen. Sharing your life is not a burden to your family. It is the greatest inheritance you can ever give. It is worth more than money or property. It is the gift of perspective. Thank you for spending this time with me and with Arthur's memory. By watching this, by thinking about his life, you have already become a part of keeping his spirit alive. And that proves the point entirely. If you found even a small piece of comfort or inspiration in this story, please give this video a like. It helps more seniors find these messages. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you don't miss our next story. Most importantly, share this video with someone you love. Don't just send it silently. When you share it, type a little message saying, "This made me think of you, and I want you to know I'll never forget you." That simple act could start a conversation that changes your entire relationship. Keep your stories alive. Keep whispering them into the ears of the people you love. Until next time, take care of your heart and never underestimate the power of an old man sitting on a porch, wondering about an arrowhead. It just might be the thing that saves a family.